Welcome to the Indian Gaming Association's The New Normal webcast. My name is Lisa Johnson. I'm the conference manager for the Indian Gaming Trade Show and Convention. I'd like to share a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Everyone is muted by default except for our speakers. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the questionnaire chat box and they'll be brought up at the end. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Victor Rocha, conference chairman of the Indian Gaming Association.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Victor Rocha. Welcome to another episode of The New Normal, your go-to source for insightful discussions on tribal gaming and other critical issues affecting Native American tribes across the United States. I'm Victor Rocha. My co-host is Jason Giles, the executive director of the Indian Gaming Association. Today, we're talking to Andy Goldberg, a technology and data consultant who wrote a recent article titled Under Attack in the upcoming edition of a Global Gaming Business magazine from our dear friend Roger Gross about the recent hackings of Caesars Entertainment and MGM Resorts. Good morning and welcome, Andy. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks very much for inviting me. Yeah, happy to talk.
Well, we are really glad you're here. This is one of those issues that I think affects everyone. Well, I know it does. But more importantly, I guess for our case is the fact that this is a really fascinating story. First of all, tell us about yourself, Andy.
Right. So I've been in the casino business for close to 20 years. I primarily am technology, analytics, database consultant. I've worked at Caesars and Palms and a couple other places. Now I mostly help casinos put together their database campaigns or build new analytic platforms and things like that, help boost revenue via looking at their customer VIPs, things like that. So yeah.
Well, wonderful. Well, at the end, we'll definitely share your information on people can get in touch with you. We really appreciate the fact that you're here. Jason, good morning. How you doing, my friend?
Morning, Victor. How you doing? I mean, Andy, we were at the G2E conference in Las Vegas, and much to my surprise, several tribal leaders came up and asked about, cybersecurity and, what are we doing about it? What is NIGC doing about it? And frankly, it's such a unique and specialized environment. We at our Indian Gaming Association, we don't have a lot of resources to even discuss this competently. So thanks for joining us today. But an even bigger shocker, you go to G2E, big commercial gaming event, and they didn't really have anything on talking about it. And I think it's more because of embarrassment. But, there's been tribes that have been hacked as well. And, unless we talk about this openly, we're just going to keep being subjected to this. So, your insight and you follow this industry and everything. So I'd love to hear this story, because this story struck me as, almost robbing somebody through the front door. You talk to grandma, you come into the house and someone's just rummaging through every room in the house while you talk to her. So I'm really interested in hearing this story.
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, your characterization is not too far off, I guess I would say. You also said something that was really important, and I'm already like skipping to the end, but yes, the fact that this needs to be discussed publicly and out in the open, and there needs to be more participation by everybody, by regulators, by trade associations, by the casinos themselves. The idea of, hey, we got hacked, we're going to keep it as quiet as possible, tell nobody, and just fix it and get back to business because we're embarrassed, is not the way to go. And yeah, like I said, that's sort of the conclusion here, but we'll give you a quick preview and say that. But yeah, I mean, in this particular case, I think one thing to be aware of is, as you indicated, there have been a number of casinos before this that were hacked. So this is not like a one-off incident. It's obviously the most high profile one, but there is an evolution that has been happening. And so if you look at some of the history, some incident such as this is sort of inevitable. And then it finally was realized last month. Yeah.
Well, Andy, I think by not talking about it, the hospital industry for a couple of years, it was, hospital after hospital was being hacked and and their medical records frozen until they paid up. I mean, that was happened with regularity, and by that I mean maybe every 6 to 12 months. But did you hear anything from Health and Human Services Department? Did you hear anything from the California? Because it happened several times in California. Did you hear anything from their public health institutions? Like you just said, a lot of these commercial businesses are just embarrassed by it and would rather just pay the ransom and move on.
Right.
And
right.
I don't think that's making our country safer.
Well, you know what? This is actually a great intro into Andy's story. So, Andy, to the hackers in the audience that are listening, tell us about this story. Tell us about your article.
Right. So basically, yes, I had written an article about 3 years ago after another casino was shut down for multiple weeks. That really piqued my interest at that point because that was sort of unprecedented. People probably know a little bit about that story, but I was kind of shocked at how quiet it was overall. And then it was just like back to business without any follow-up, like what happened here, how did those hackers at that point get in? What were the infiltration procedures? What did they do? It just was like forgotten about. And so, fast forward to now, and really, it probably would have been the same. Caesars was the first to be attacked, and they kept it, under the rug. They didn't make any announcements publicly. It was only after MGM was also attacked, and it was very obvious at that point. They had systems that were down and so many of their so much disruption at all their casinos, and that started to pique interest of some journalists and Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and they did some digging, and that's how Caesars was sort of revealed that, oh yeah, this happened to us too, and we paid this ransom. So then, there were two things going on at once. And yeah, so I just tried the article that will be coming out in a couple of days, is really just like trying to piece lots of information that was out there that was reported by multiple sources and try to sort of collect the most interesting and important things into some sort of like executive summaries. You could get, a quick read and like be pretty informed on what's going on. But yeah, I mean, you have a hacking group that had been attacking many companies, not in the casino business, but mostly tech companies, a lot of telecom companies. And it started to sort of come together. People like security monitoring firms and research firms started noticing this pattern basically a full year earlier, around August of 2022. Some, notices were put out there, some hacks of some other company, like again, some tech companies were sort of pieced together and said, hey, yeah, the same thing happened to us and these guys. And then some of these other security consultants were saying our clients have had the same thing. And they started to, realize the similarities and start piecing this together. But that being said, so some of this information was starting to be known a full year ahead of the MGM and Caesars hacks in August, September of this year.
Well, it was interesting. It seems like everybody was on alert during the summer. There was the social engineering hacks of people talking to the cage managers and people pulling out $100,000, $200,000, $1 million or whatever. And this happened a couple times, happened to some tribes, happened to commercials. So that was the interesting. Now, as somebody who lives on Twitter, I saw when people started complaining. I think Vital Vegas had a post that people were starting to talk about being hacked, other information. People were talking about points missing. So it kind of happened within a couple hours when people started talking about it. So it blew up on Twitter pretty quickly. And, but so first we saw the MGM, that happens. Everybody notices, and it wasn't until little later that Caesars was announced they announced that Caesars was part of it. So, but we know what both of these have in common is the way they hacked, but the way they responded to it were completely different. So when we found out it was now, first of all, who is this group and who did the hacking?
Right. So that's one of the tricky parts. So this group has sort of been given this name Scattered Spider. There were some of the earlier reports back in 2022. One group gave him the nickname like Octopus, OKTA, because they use this Okta system for getting through. So, again, it's they don't really make themselves too public. So some of the names were tossed around, different things, and it's hard to pin down who they were. But one of the things that I guess made them effective, especially on the social engineering side, was that they appear to be US and UK based, whereas traditionally a lot of these hacking groups come out of Eastern Europe or Russia, and are unable to make convincing sounding phone calls, whereas an American has a much easier time calling up a help desk and impersonating somebody and saying, hey, I lost my my phone. I need to reset my passwords. And
is that what happened here? Is that what, do we know what how this happened?
So we don't know exactly, but some of the clues again go back to some of the tech companies that were infiltrated earlier. So one of the companies is Twilio. They are a very successful company. If you want to build anything related to voice and messaging, they have APIs that let you put all that stuff together. So a bunch of their security people started getting text messages. Hey, the Twilio admin schedule has changed. Log into twilio-sso.com.
Wow.
SSO single sign-on. Or
my wife would be so into that. My wife would have us hacked so quick, man.
Right. So, and what they seem to have done is, again, this is where this Okta firm is sort of a key player here, because so many companies rely on them for their access control and identity management, that they basically built a login page that looked like the real one, which was relatively easy to do because since so many people are using the same vendor for this, Okta, they're building the same login page with just maybe the logo of the company changed, and people would then type in their credentials, but they're logging into a fake site that are controlled by these hackers. So they're getting every keystroke as the real admin is fooled and typing it in, including a multi-factor or two-factor passcode, one of those codes that you get via text message. And then that is going straight to the hackers, who are then logging in to the real website in real time. So that was one of the methods they used to infiltrate a number of companies.
By the way, Okta is a lesser known name, but forms a critical part of cybersecurity systems of major corporations. The identity management company boasts more than 18,000 customers who use its products to provide a single login point for many different platforms that give company users. Zoom uses it for the companies, Google, Workspace, VMware, all these platforms. A lot of people, more people than use it, and they social engineered into this company. So what exactly is social engineering? Andy?
Well, social engineering is basically impersonation of getting somebody, convincing someone to do something that they shouldn't be doing, fooling them into it. It always after the fact, when you read something, it sounds so crazy. I would never have fallen for that, or I would know. But that's what makes it so effective, is that they're coming up with ways of fooling you that you hadn't thought of. Or a lot of, you mentioned earlier the hacks or the cage robberies that happened where someone was impersonating the casino owner, Derek Stevens, up at Cirque. They didn't just call up and say, hey, I'm Derek Stevens, can you deliver $1 million? Like, they call up in a panic, like, hey, something about a fire and a fire department, and you need to get this money right away. Oh, we don't have time for a double
Wow.
check and a password check. And they put the person, the recipient, the victim, on some sort of like high alert, like that they're going to lose their job if they don't carry out these actions right away. In the case again of these hacks, they managed to make some calls to the help desk that initially to like turn off certain security measures that were normally in place, so that then when they were able to get the passwords and get in, they had a lower barrier to entry. The password was enough. And yeah, so there's a variety of techniques. And what's scary is, yes, that this group, this scattered spider, appears to be very good at it, and has fooled lots and lots of different well-respected companies. Yeah.
So Eastern European accents are out and English accents are in. I think that's what you're telling us, right?
I mean, I think if you're doing it by telephone, yeah, that certainly is a little bit of a giveaway. Obviously, it's not 100%, but yeah. So the other part is, and this is where it's a little bit difficult. And again, you have to remember that most of the information about this is still unverified rumors a little bit. There's no one who really knows who's talking. So the other part of it is like they're good with the social engineering, the getting inside and I guess doing some disruption, but they sort of partner with this other group, Alpha V, who is more specialized with the ransomware. Like they get in, they encrypt all your data and make it unusable to you. And they have lots of tools to do that. So the two combined, we're sort of an effective partnership, and got at least one of the vendors to pay up, or one of the companies to pay up.
So what we happened is like how long was MGM? Now again, we had two. Now according to rumors and what we heard, and by the way, I believe there was a press release that Scattered Spider that I read about. I didn't see it myself, but I saw it referred to in several articles that they actually made a statement after the hacking saying that, we were responsible. We went through this. So they kind of said it was them and this is how they did it. They kind of did a smoking gun. There are cases of that. I remember, I think the SANS hacking, which was done by the Iranians or something like that, if I remember correctly, out of Pennsylvania. They released a press release, but that was pretty much, because of politics and stuff like that. But these guys seem to be more like bragging about it. Is that your take?
Definitely a little bit, yeah. And sort of, they're trying to sort of push the victim into some sort of corner. They're sort of trying to appeal to the public and saying, hey, look, we have compromised MGM. We have all this customer data that we're going to sell. And they're sort of trying to get the public, the customers, to put pressure on the company to say, hey, wait, these guys stole my personal information from you. You better pay up and get it back. But that's really not an effective method, because once the hackers have the data, there's no guarantee, there's no way they can promise that they're going to get rid of it, delete it, not sell it in the future. So everything, it's a bunch of like honor amongst thieves, but there really isn't any.
Especially when MGM announces that it's about $100 million loss. And I saw Bill Hornbucker's a keynote at G2E, and he kind of was whistling past the graveyard about the hacking. It was like, oh, it was nothing, and he was leaned back and he was kicking back. It was not a big deal. We took care of it and stuff like that. And except for the sweat coming down his brow while he's saying it and smiling, I didn't buy any of it. He just seemed like he was trying to uptalk a really bad situation, which I think we all can understand, especially if you lose $100 million. And yet on the opposite side of this, according to the articles that we read, Caesars paid the ransom. So, and that was after we found about the MGM. about 3 or 4 days into this, we hear about Caesars taking a different approach. What's your take on that, Andy? Why would Caesars, obviously it seems very obvious after $100 million loss, but at that point, is it easier just to pay the ransom?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a conclusion that some people might reach after, seeing this whole thing play out, right? It's pretty rare to have sort of two scenarios go on almost simultaneously with different strategies and get to see the outcome of both, right? But that's basically what you had here. And clearly, there's going to be some observers who say, look, Caesars did the smart thing. They paid $15 million and that was it. They were back to normal. They didn't have this extended disruption, no embarrassment. And in the end, MGM is reporting, $100 million hit to earnings in the next quarter. So clearly the expense was much, much higher. So, but I don't think that that's the right read. I don't think that's the right way to go, because Caesars now has basically painted itself as like, hey, yeah, we're willing to pay, we're willing to negotiate. And I don't see any reason why a group would, first of all, honor any deal that they made with them, and why they wouldn't be working today on how to get back in and do something else. Whereas MGM at least has shown it was sort of messy and ugly, but at least they were able to recover their data and systems internally. And, ultimately if what we hear is true, ultimately these hackers didn't get anything. So they didn't benefit in any way. So why would they then try and attack MGM again in the future? MGM was sort of famously a victim in, I think, 2019. So hard to say exactly, but maybe they learned some lessons in that. Again, their recovery methodology seemed a little bit messy and took a while, but ultimately, I guess they did get back up on their feet by themselves. I think there's a lot of associated costs going forward that are unknown and uncalculated right now. There's talk about insurance, right? So I can't imagine that any insurance carrier is going to continue to insure Caesars unless they, the minimum of the premiums has to be $15 million, right? Why would you?
Escrow, baby, escrow.
Right. So, I mean, it's not like, hey, insurance covered it and now we're good. Like if they continue to have insurance, they're going to have to basically pay the full amount ahead of time. And then you have some credit risk and things like that. And just ultimately, there's confidence in the, from the player base. Do I think that there's a big group of players who are going to say, oh, we're going to stay home, we're not going to visit this casino anymore? I don't think that's the case. Realistically, everyone at this point has certain fatigue from this whole thing. Everyone has been hacked or their data has been stolen one way or another over the past couple of years. But there's something to be said for hey, one company was not willing to negotiate and another one was just here, take our money. And
so now that you've scared us completely, Andy. We appreciate that. I'm sure. So what can the casinos do to prevent this? I mean, what can you do? I belong to a board for my tribe, and when I joined, I had to do a 30-minute training on hacking, an online course to talk about opening up attachments and all the stuff that I already intuitively know already as somebody who's been on the internet nonstop for 25 years.
Right.
What can we do? Is AI going to help us, or is AI going to hurt us?
Well, that's a good question. AI, I think there's been a lot of stuff. AI, that's a whole separate topic, right? There's been a lot of promises and forecasts made of how everything's going to change with AI, but Yeah,
It's good for profile pictures, Andy. Give it a little credit. It's really good for profile pictures, you know.
there you go. There you go. Yeah, I could use
Same here. That's why I'm no chin. You
right.
know, I have it
Clean
AI
something up.
removed.
Sure. Yeah. That's a good idea. But what to do, unfortunately to be proactive and to be as safe as possible is hard work, right? So one thing that the casinos are good at is they, know for a long time, and they're sort of the leaders in like physical security, right? So anytime there's any vulnerability to a game, to a table game, to a slot machine, something like that, they're pretty quick to detect it and shut it down. And so they have some precedent in terms of like understanding security threats that are unique to the industry, right? This is actually something that's not unique to the industry because every company is being hit by hackers. So they can participate in the conversation and participate in terms of following best practices that other maybe tech leader companies that you might put ahead of casinos in terms of like what they're doing and following their lead in terms of how to cut some of this off early. Like, we talked about this group was able to infiltrate some of these other tech companies over the past year, but they made big public announcements and they did a debriefing afterwards, that's on their websites and things like that, where they talked about, hey, here's what happened. Here's how these people got in. Here's what we were able to do to limit any kind of damage. So yes, they got in, they stole about 25 of our employee data, but we were able to stop them before they stole any customer data. Or in some cases, that wasn't the case. They did steal 1 or 2% of the customer database, and the companies talk about how they notified all those customers, but the other 98%, were safe and things like that. So casinos definitely need to be on high alert, be aware, be following a lot of this, these conversations that are happening out there, not isolate themselves. That's probably the worst thing you can do, is try to just sort of like do work in isolation and not be aware of other threats, not be talking to your vendors, and just sort of try to hope like, hey, if this eventually happens, hopefully we have the expertise to deal with it, because probably don't, especially if you haven't been preparing and planning.
Well, Andy, so someone put it out on a question, those companies are publicly traded. They have reporting requirements. So certainly if something's hitting their bottom line, they have to report it. Some of those hospital hacks that I referenced earlier were a lot of private nonprofit hospitals. And is there a distinction? Should we even be concerned about that? And then you could throw on another layer, like, Department of Defense has been hacked. Veterans Administration has been hacked. Are there different responses depending on where you are, in whether you're a private company, commercial company, federal or state entity, or your position seems to be like, it doesn't matter. You can't pay that ransom, and they're going to get what information they get, and they can, like you said, honor among thieves. That's what I don't understand. Once they're in there, Andy, they can pretty much take anything they want, right?
Yeah. Yes, that's true. To an extent. Again, there are ways, if you have a good network set up and have some defenses in place, you can limit what they can take. So it's not just once they get past the first gate, it's all open, right? You can have like multiple, they breach the first layer and they got some low value assets, but they weren't able to breach the second or third layer and get the real good stuff. So that's a little part of it, right? So not having it just be all or nothing type of setup. But yes, what you're saying is certainly the case. Like different companies and of different sizes, certainly the challenges are much greater if you're a small company. Like I know that, many of our audience today is, that they are not a big public company with a dozen casinos, that they're just one property, sometimes pretty small, and don't have huge financial resources or personnel to be monitoring this 24/7. But again, that sort of goes to where the disclosure and the coordination and cooperation comes into play, because a single operator is going to have difficulty taking on the full burden themselves of how to defend and how to monitor for possible infiltrations. Whereas the more information that is shared publicly and shared among casinos and other companies, the more that people can learn and say, hey, this is going to be the most controversial part of the article, right? Caesars was hit via social engineering by this scattered spider group, by whatever specific means, right? They kept it private. And so a week later, 2 weeks later, whatever the exact timeline was, the same group was able to do the same exact thing to MGM. If Caesars had come out and said, hey, look what just happened to us. We want to warn all of our colleagues in this industry, watch out for this group. They just hit us. We don't want the same thing to happen to you. Yes, you're our competitor, but we're all in this business together. Then, is it possible that the whole MGM thing could have been avoided entirely? Possibly. And so, when one casino gets hit or even just suspects a potential someone's poking around, the more that they publicize that, the more that they tell their, again, colleagues and things like that, the more it's going to help everyone like raise their defenses and be on high alert and things like that.
Well, I've heard of hackings within Indian country, and I know the tribes have been very tight-lipped about it. So, I think that's just the business response is to keep your bad news, close and not do any publicity about it. But I think a lot of people have that same mindset. I've been told about tribes here in Southern California that have been hacked and nobody has said anything, nor can I say anything because they haven't been proved. But I wonder how much of that is speculation and fear, FUD, how much of that out there, people are just really kind of terrified. Anything, if any little hiccup happens, you think you're being hacked and stuff like this. And go ahead.
Well, part of it is a little bit of an embarrassment. I'm sure part of it is liability issues. Like, if it's known that some group was able to steal personal customer data, I guess that opens up a company to some sort of like liability, possibly. I haven't really seen much in the way of like litigation related to that, but
I changed my mom's maiden name, so she actually has a new maiden name now. So I think that's going to keep me hack proof for a while.
There you go.
McGillicuddy, that's her last name now. It's McGillicuddy. So, I think, but we have to do stupid things like that. I think, I joke, but I think at this point, we have to, our data is everywhere. You go to Target to buy something, they want to give you a credit card. You go to 7-Eleven to buy a Slurpee, they want to give you a credit card. We're in this data-centric society now where all your data is the most important thing about you. They don't even care about your face. They just want your data. So we live in a society where we're just so vulnerable and exposed. What can we do other than to change our mother's middle name and start all over again and do our birth date again and, start fresh? What can we do, Andy?
Yeah. Yes, what you're saying is sort of the unfortunate, reality that we live in. And there's this fatigue, most people out there as a consumer have gotten multiple notices over the course of the last couple of years, like, oh, your data was involved in a breach. from who knows how many companies, like you said, a retail company, your cable provider, anybody. It's just all over the time. And most people at this point just say like, okay, well, hopefully, my credit card will cover me if there's some kind of fraud or something like that. So it's very, unfortunately, it's very difficult. Yeah, exactly. But I do think, again, I think that the silence is the worst thing. And there needs to be some level of coordination. You mentioned earlier that, by being public companies, MGM and Caesars were subject to certain reporting requirements and things like that. The state regulators could take a more proactive stance and make more requirements public and say, hey, look, if you want to maintain your gaming license, you need to be more open in this area and things like that. I understand, again, not everyone in our audience is subject to a traditional state gaming regulator, but you can have trade groups and commercial groups, or, collaboration among multiple entities that say, hey, look, if one of us is hacked or compromised, we're pledging that we are going to share that information, and you do the same if it happens to you, and things like that. So it does appear that the natural course of things is to keep quiet. So you sort of need a higher level entity to say, no, you can't operate in that manner. We're gonna require you to speak up a little bit more.
Andy, I think that's a really good idea. And Jason, if you look at it in terms of what they did with problem gambling, where everybody has to pitch in, everybody has to be part of it. And I think that's an example, especially look at how long that path was, and the tribes and the commercial gaming guys all accepted, the baseline rules and regs that we should have for problem gambling, what to look for and stuff and like that. But I do think that we need to be more forward with this, maybe
that's the thing, Andy. I mean, nationally, like, you don't hear Congress trying to pass any kind of helpful legislation, and you don't see any of the relevant agencies really. I mean, Homeland Security, I think, does it in terms of national security. We don't want our nuclear sites being hacked.
Right.
But there's not a national strategy against this. I was going to ask you, just for a point of reference, like, how often do these types of things happen in the European Union?
That's a good question. I don't have an answer on that.
I mean, I presume that, like, countries like Russia, China, North Korea, these guys that are fomenting and allowing this to happen, I assume they're not necessarily under a threat of this, although they could be. Like you said, there's, I don't think these people have any.
Let's hope our hackers are patriots. I think that's what you're trying to say, Jason. Is that what you're saying? You're hoping,
or at least equal opportunity hackers? Yeah, I mean,
I think that's actually an interesting question. I think what is attractive in U.S. market is that there are big companies that have the resources to pay, and that makes them the most attractive targets globally, not for any political or reason or anything like that, but just, hey, yeah, these are the biggest casinos in the world. These are the biggest tech companies in the world. And so writing a $15 million check is they're willing to do that,
right.
Because there were billions and things like that. But,
but I'd say that, Andy, because the White House announced today, they're going to do an executive order on artificial intelligence, and it's coming out in 2 weeks. And the European Union put the brakes on AI, Victor. Like, they really restricted its rollout, and they're still evaluating it. And but in this country, we've already got 4 or 5 versions of it, whichever one you want to sign up with, and they're already trying to outdo each other. And again, an executive order really isn't worth all that much. I mean, we need laws and we need infrastructure to help make sure AI rolls out, that it doesn't turn into that they take over the nuclear defense system or something.
Asimov, man, we need those rules, and iRobot is what we need.
Well, yeah,
Those
exactly.
robotic rules and
And
iRobot.
you're not gonna get it in an executive order that, frankly, only federal agencies have to adhere to, so, I guess, Andy, I was asking, is America like the big sucker walking down the street that the
Oh
police
man,
target every time, step right up?
Ouch.
Because you just don't hear about this around the world, at least, I
Just
don't know
blink,
why it
Andy.
would.
You didn't even have to answer. Just blink.
Well, you're obviously you're expanding the scope of this,
Uh-huh.
issue beyond, just how does this affect casinos to how does it affect our,
Right.
the country and national defenses. Obviously, yeah, that is a very interesting question. Obviously, I don't have the answers for that or to know. From a regulatory side, I will agree. I think, you're sort of hinting at that a little bit, that the response from, government entities has been less than stellar, I would say. I think in the case of the Nevada Gaming Control Board, they put out one tweet mid-September that said, we're monitoring the situation, we're in contact with the FBI. And as far as I can tell, there's been no follow-up ever since then, no report on what they monitored or what they determined. Obviously, like you just said, the FBI really, they can sort of help out, but they really can't get your data back or anything like that.
Mhm.
There's nothing that the FBI is really able to do. So yeah, I mean, what is the response from the,
Well,
from
Andy,
Nevada Gaming?
we've had we had a big podcast on artificial intelligence, and we had a gentleman tell us that they're looking at using artificial intelligence to run their security and surveillance. Right now they have 8-hour shifts, 4 or 5 guys watching a dozen cameras at a casino. And if AI can do this and it never sleeps, and it can detect anomalies a lot easier than the human eye, and it can also probably retina scans and face scans and all that as well. But isn't that just another opportunity for hackers? If you've got an AI running your security system, seems like that's another entrance that they could get in.
Right. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. But yes, every new thing that is attached, that is connected to your network, is a potential door for somebody to get in, right? So casinos are especially vulnerable because as an industry, we rely on so many different vendors, right? So you have your CMS, you have your LMS, you have your POS, and then you have nowadays with the hospitality side of things, so many third parties, right? You have someone who manages the key access to the hotel rooms, and all kinds of different different parts of your casino, right? And obviously every new thing that gets attached is another potential vulnerability, and people do have to be aware and at least ask the right questions to all their partners and vendors and say, hey, are you following up-to-date security procedures and things like that? And in some cases, the answer is obviously not. There are certainly vendors out there who, built their application using some technology from 5 or 10 years ago, and that's still in place. They're still saying, we are on version 2013 of the database system, right? Well, it's 2023. You need to migrate us forward. You still need to run the security protocol that encrypts the data from client to server is still on an old version that's outdated. Yeah, all these things, unfortunately, those are a little more sophisticated hacks, and a little more expertise and knowledge is needed. But vulnerability is vulnerability, right? This is different than just getting in through the front door, but any door is once they're in, they're in. Yeah,
right.
we talked a little bit about, I think you mentioned the Sands hack, and I think you had said earlier something about like a fish tank.
Yeah, that's the famous where they got in through the Wi-Fi of the fish tank and were
Right.
able to get into the system, and
Yeah, I don't think I'd heard of that or didn't remember that, but I do remember, like, I think Target was one of the more was one of the first very high profile hacks. They stole a lot of credit card data, and that initial infiltration was through a HVAC supplier, someone who was running their freezers in the
Wow.
supermarket had access, and these hackers were able to like get that company's access credentials, and from there get into the whole the rest of the system. So yeah, it's casinos have to be aware too, who they're doing business with. Yeah.
What can people do now? One of the things in your article, you talk about cloud servers. Now, are they more secure than in-house service? Was Hillary Clinton right in bringing her server to in-house as opposed to like putting out somewhere? Obviously, I'm being facetious. You guys know that. Right. But I mean, is there a difference between in-house, or are we just vulnerable to the industry? We just right. Your data's out there. Go ahead.
There's no universal truth, right? There's no like, this is definitely better than that. The fact is, in any situation, you have to be, on top of monitoring all your access, who has access, where it's coming from, any kind of unusual traffic and things like that. Cloud services are appealing, because it's easy to spin up a bunch of servers out there on your Amazon or Google accounts, and start running new services or put your data out there and things like that. But managing those environments is tricky, right? Because by default, if you just open up a new AWS account, it has, it allows access from any IP address globally, right? You have to go in there and adjust the settings to lock things down and say, hey, the only access should be from, the IP addresses from our network, and lots of different settings like that. Whereas in-house, you sort of already have some of that protection built in, because physically people can only connect from certain locations that are likely to be on site, or if it is remote, it is via clients that you yourself are controlling and things like that. But even that is only effective if you are keeping track of exactly who is accessing and where they're accessing things from and things like that. So again, one of the methodologies, according to some of the cybersecurity monitors, was that they were, once inside, they were installing these VPN software. So it was making it, they were physically somewhere else, perhaps on another continent, but they were making it appear that they were logging in from someone's computer, on site, or maybe remotely, but in the same city or something like that. So that's the kind of stuff that makes these things very tricky, but also, again, emphasizes the importance of really monitoring things and locking down and making sure like new software isn't being installed without people's knowledge. And it is a rabbit hole of potential vulnerabilities, and it is a little bit disheartening because it is very difficult. And the famous saying is, you can be as work as hard as possible, and the hackers really only have to be successful one time to get inside and only exploit one mistake.
Well, Andy, you've scared the crap out of all of us,
I'm sure.
So
yeah, exactly.
This is the reality. I think, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. We've demanded ease of use. We've demanded easier. Nobody wants to hack in. All our passwords are saved to our browsers, to our phone, right, to, everything. The online banking has made it easier to access your money. So, we're vulnerable in ways we don't even understand, and obviously to your question real quick is that, a lot of small tribes can't afford to have their own IT companies, to have somebody that has the background and the understanding to keep them protected. So, we rely on these companies. And I think that's what's so terrifying. I was just saying on Monday, Okta, the company, the cybersecurity breach wiped out $2 billion in market cap on Monday. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
I just saw that. I think they themselves were infiltrated and they gave up some customer data, like customers reporting on incidents would upload their logs to Okta for review. And that's what I think these hackers got. So these logs of the potential infiltrations had things like passwords and here are the steps that somebody took to break into our system. And so you get basically were roadmaps. Yeah. And so I think that affected the stock of their company. I just seen that myself. Yeah, it's again, I mean, it sort of says nobody is immune for sure. You can, the idea is to mitigate the damage as much as possible. But again, that sort of goes back. The idea that like a company ought to be embarrassed or try to hide that they were compromised or attacked, it's sort of silly because at this point everybody has been. So you're not any different than anybody else.
it's like cold sores in California. Everybody is everybody has it. So just don't even worry about it. You know what I mean? But so we live in this world of hacking. Let's go to some questions.
Yeah. I mean, Victor,
we have here. Yeah. Go ahead.
A couple of the questions. I mean, they were asking, how can we learn more about this and support tribal organizations to protect themselves? We are going to bring this up. We're making it a priority at NCAI's annual conference in New Orleans at our tribal gaming subcommittee, but also at the task force that we do with NCAI. And that, I think that's a big step because we're usually focused on policy stuff, whether it's Supreme Court decisions or legislation in Congress, but we want to make sure that this cybersecurity gets elevated to a level where tribes can start to at least have better defense systems, and we can start to put pressure on the federal agencies that we work with. Like we need some technical advice, we need guidance, we need everything about what's going on out there. Again, to Andy's point, just more information sharing, if anything. And that's one way. But I mean, again, Andy, a lot of it, conceptually, it's just hard for a lot of folks. Like even, let's just say a casino CEO, what is it? I mean, unless they came from the tech industry or know how to code or studied this, it's not something you can put your hands and work something out. It's not like they can just draft up the memo saying, this is what we're going to do for cybersecurity. And there were some other good points brought out in the questions and answers. Sometimes entities, Andy, that are insured and have insurance for this, the insurance, the first thing they do is tell everybody to be quiet, put out non-disclosure agreements, and we'll take care of it. And so, the insurance can cut both ways. It's not helping our point of, they need to share this as widely as possible. So, this is a big issue for Indian country. And frankly, it's got to be the thing that keeps a lot of tribes and tribal casinos up at night, worried about this, and I think we're just going to try to keep elevating it at our different conferences and everything, Victor. But
we had two sessions at our show. One about preventative, and then the second one is about what do you do when you get hacked. You know what I mean? Right. It's like post hacking, have a plan. Here's what you need to do, and I think everybody needs to attend these sessions. Like you said, we will be doing something at NCAI in November, but I saw sessions on hacking at G2E. They had some sessions there and they were really good. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend them, but we will be prioritizing it at our show. But I think, one of the questions, I believe it was Craig Duckworth was saying, we need to have, where can people help? Where, I think it's up to us to stand up and lead on this issue instead of just sitting back and waiting and, to be hacked. And I think that's kind of where we're all at. It's like one of those monster movies, when the zombies eventually get to your house, what do? And I think we're all waiting. I think we're in the same situation. So, if there's any more questions, we're going to be wrapped. First of all, Andy, thank you so much for scaring the
Yeah,
crap
Andy,
out of us.
great.
Benjamin Mitchell says, great comments, Andy. Question to make everyone feel better or scared them completely. Is a network ever completely protected? No. Example, the Iran nuclear program was hacked. It was Israel. Remember, they got the centrifuges and made them go really wild, which is a fascinating story for anybody who cares about this stuff. And, again, I read everything, and that's kind of my life. So, but is there a way to be protected? Is that possible, Andy? Is this rhetorical or is this philosophical?
I don't think that there's anything that's 100% safe. There's no
You're so
way
dead, Billy. Benjamin, you're so toast.
there's no, your own house, right? You can't protect your house from every kind of potential criminal or someone trying to break in, right? You have doors, you have windows, things like that. You can put up gates, you can put up alarms, you can put up a Ring doorbell. You can do these things and be aware, be monitoring things as much as possible. Again, sort of have multi-level security. So the initial breach alerts everything, but there's no value there. But no, you have to be persistent and you have to monitor things. And you do have to be aware when everyone wants to move forward with technology. There's so many cool tools out there. There's so many cool things to add to a guest experience by going, cardless or mobile phone only. That, yeah, I mean, of course, there's temptation to move forward and provide these great experiences to the guests, but everything that you add to your network, to your resort, you do have to sort of have that security focus in mind and say, yes, okay, here's the benefit. Let's not ignore what the potential costs or vulnerabilities are. And just, again, from a CEO's perspective, no, they can't write all the rules themselves, but they can, continually make sure and ask questions and poke around and find out, who is thinking about this on a constant basis, and make sure that those voices are heard. Yeah.
Well, you know what, and we have a question here, but I was a little facetious earlier about Hillary's server, but her server never got hacked. It was John Podesta who got social engineered, which opened up that whole thing and stuff like that. So even that, being silly, but I mean, social engineering is here. I think we really have to be careful. Now, one of our listeners, before we go, they said, do you see hacking activities affecting or deterring tribal casinos that are testing out cloud-based software and systems? So, and this kind of goes to our question is, having a server in your closet better than with the company and testing them out? What is your take on this, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the cloud-based systems, right? There's only basically three major providers, right? There's Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. So again, just like this Okta became sort of a central point of vulnerability, when you centralize, that's a little bit gives the attackers sort of, you're helping them out a little bit, because once they are able to find a way in, they can repeat that over and over. So not to dissuade someone from going to the cloud, there are obviously a lot of benefits in doing so. But again, there's no magic key. It's just constant monitoring and being aware of what's going on. And from the casino's perspective, you have to pick your cloud and be very familiar with the nuances and the security plan or platform of that particular cloud site. AWS has these VPNs that are actually pretty tricky to initially set up. You can get very detailed. You can get, row level or column level security on your database, things like that. But also, if you don't do a lot, then everything's just wide open. So you have to, you set it up, and then you have to really go in and really understand how to get very fine-tuned access control.
Well, you know what? I think what Andy's saying is we're all responsible for our destiny and our future. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? We have to be the ones to take care of ourselves because you can't trust. And, that's the new world we live in, trust but verify twice, second ID, email, cell phone number. So, Andy, we want to thank you very much. We're at the top of the hour. We really appreciate this. It's a fascinating conversation, and I don't think we're anywhere near done. We'd like to have you back sometime in the future to continue this story. I haven't got any emails from Caesars or MGM, so I think we're doing good. Jason, first of all, listen, we'd like to thank all the listeners. We had a really good attendance. I think this is an issue that it affects everyone, and we will be continuing the conversation. Andy, thank you very much for attending.
Thank you, Andy.
Jason,
Great.
would you like to say goodbye to everyone? So,
Yeah,
Jason.
no, thank you very much. Appreciate it. So yeah, this was all, I guess, initiated. There's an article, as you mentioned at the top, they're in GGB magazine. We have covered most of the things that are there, so I hope this has been helpful.
Yes,
the
Please
audience.
check out his article in the next issue of Global Gaming Business Magazine. It's called I got it right here. I forgot it. Under Attack.
Okay.
Apologize. It was right in front of me. So again, Andy, thank you so much. All the guests, everyone for sticking around. We really appreciate it. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, absolutely.